In the process of making each episode of Henshin Time, there's an information gathering phase that we go through before we write out a script, and by we I mean Manny and myself. Over the years we spent countless hours just poring over information, corroborating, verifying, fact-checking to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, it's not a perfect process, and sometimes things either get lost in translation, and I'll be completely honest, sometimes it's just not 100% accurate. Some of that has to do with the fact that some of that information just isn't as readily available as it should be. Be that as it may, we've always tried to present the information as accurately as possible, even if that hasn't always happened. Hello everyone, my name is John from Toy Bounty Hunters, and while you're waiting on the next part of Henshin Time, I hope you'll enjoy this very special presentation that will serve as a companion piece to Henshin Time Part 3, The Marvel Connection. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. So prior to the release of Henshin Time Part 3, The Marvel Connection, in the aforementioned information gathering phase, a name came up while we were researching, and that was Gene Pelc, a former Marvel employee. So here's what we know. During the late 70s and early 80s, Gene Pelc was an employee of Marvel for their TV and animation departments. He was also a representative for both Marvel East and West. His responsibilities, though, seemed to extend outside of just having his hands in production work. According to this article we found, which I will be referencing throughout this video, Gene Pelc said, and I quote, "In the animation division, we are doing the all-new Spider-Man episodes for NBC. We did 26 for syndication. I oversee and coordinate what we do in the studios, which is taking the shows from layouts to camera there." This, of course, is a reference to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which did air on NBC on Saturday mornings in the early 1980s, as well as the Spider-Man solo cartoon, which also aired in the early 1980s in syndication. Now, this is where his responsibilities extend outside of production. In the same article, Gene Pelc also says, quote, "I am also acquiring properties in Japan to be used in America and trying to put together some co-productions. One product that I just acquired is a war film called 1908X Future War. We'll have to change the title, but it's a 130-minute animation concerning what everybody today is afraid of, the accidental nuclear war." Gene also seemed to consistently travel between Japan and the United States. Another thing he would go on to say, and I quote, "Here on this side of the world, I try to license Marvel's properties. Merchandising of comics, anything between the US and Japan, and also Korea. We just opened up Korea. It has a huge growing market. Over in Japan, I've been responsible for 208 live-action half-hour TV shows. We've been on the air with the Marvel copyright, the Marvel concept, and the Marvel characters 4 years in a row, starting with Spider-Man, which began roughly 4.5 years ago." And this is where we get the connection between Marvel and Toei. Gene Pelc was obviously a key figure, but to what capacity? He also goes on to say this in the same article. "This was a Japanese live-action version of Spider-Man. All new, all reshot, all scripted over there. You won't be seeing them here though, because of Marvel's commitment to Columbia. They had a live-action show, so the territory is limited to Japan. We're controlling the territories because the Japanese market is so big, but so different. Mostly what we do is cut off the Japanese market as a territory, and then we make film in Japan, for Japan. But we don't let it out because it would conflict with the other shows that are going on. We did something called Battle Fever J, which is a concept based on the Avengers, in that you had superheroes from different countries. Captains France, Kenya, Russia, and Japan, and Miss America." Gene would also go on to say, quote, "I found that it was much easier once we had done a lot of Japanese programs to come up with the new concepts based more closely on what the Japanese are viewing, rather than just taking Marvel characters and redoing them. At that point, we started getting into creative new stuff. We did 53 episodes of Denji Man, about a year of that. The latest one, called Sun Vulcan, is technically our best product. We did 52 episodes. I just talked to Stan Lee about a half hour ago, and he is so in love with the program. He said that in all his experience of writing for people, if they could see this show in America on Saturday morning, it would wipe out anything because it's full of action and very entertaining. He's trying to sell this to an American network, HBO, anyone who buys films. He can sell it as is with a new voice track, or take the prints and cut out the parts where Japanese actors appear, which is about 1/3 of the film. Reshoot that with American actors and cut back to the show with the special effects. and opticals and visuals, thus creating a series that looks American. And as we already know, it would be another 10 years before this would actually happen, thanks to the efforts of Haim Saban. It really makes you wonder, though, how things might have been different if Marvel had actually followed through on any of this, but I digress. Eventually, Marvel and Toei would part ways, but throughout the years, they have teamed up from time to time to put out projects together. I'm sure what many of you are wondering at this point is, though, why no mention of Gene Pelc in Henshin Time Part 3, and what the significance of his role was in all of this? Here's the thing, though. This is it. This was the only information we were able to find out about Gene Pelc at the time. So without any corroborating information to double and triple check with, we really didn't want to potentially misrepresent Gene's position. In hindsight, though, there was a bit of regret not mentioning Gene Pelc because he was more than worthy of at least that. I have always been of the personal belief that Gene Pelc was a lot more instrumental than any of us know. What we do know is that yes, Gene was real, he worked for Marvel, and at the time of the publication of this article, he apparently lived in Japan. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that he had at least a basic knowledge of the Japanese language and culture, or was fluent. He also worked on 4 of Toei's most significant tokusatsu productions with some degree of creative input, as well as being involved in the licensing with Toei for Marvel's Tomb of Dracula anime adaptation. I think it also bears mentioning that Gene worked on a unique comic book that ended up being quite successful for him. Now, before I read what Gene had to say in the article, I should preface by saying that nowhere in the article does it confirm, deny, or imply that Gene himself is a religious man. Given his enthusiasm over this particular project, my assumption would be that he is, but there's nothing to back that up. What I'm most personally proud of is the concept of the Pope comic. I was in Tokyo when I heard that Pope John Paul II was going to take a trip to Japan. I happened to know a Polish priest, and he came up with a way for me to meet the Pope. I had a chance to very briefly say hello. That's when the idea occurred to me. How about a Pope comic? The St. Francis book was a tremendous successful comic from Marvel. The Polish priest put me in touch with Father Malinsky, who is a lifelong friend of the Pope. He grew up with him, visits with him all the time at the Vatican, and is the official biographer of the Pope. He's written 9 or 10 books about his life. So I met with Father Malinsky and showed him the St. Francis book, and we discussed the possibility of doing the Pope comic. He apparently conferred with the Pope, and his people came back to my house the next day and said that the Pope was willing to do it if he wrote the script. I brought Father Malinsky into New York. The father brought all of his books, all the European books, plus pictures of the Pope when he was a child, of his family, and home. I honestly believe the Pope comic will be the largest selling comic of all time. We're going to do Saint Teresa next. And I think Gene misspoke here and actually meant to say Mother Teresa, because a comic book did come out in 1983 called Mother Teresa of Calcutta, but looking at the credits for the comic book, I couldn't find any indication that Gene was involved in this. Of course, that doesn't mean that he wasn't, it just doesn't show up on the credit line of the comic book. Now, I'm just going to speculate here for a little bit, but the way Gene comes across in this article is somebody that was genuinely enthusiastic and passionate about the work he was doing. He loved anime and tokusatsu, or at the very least liked them, and believed that they could be profitable here in North America. But what actually became of Gene? Where is he? What is he doing? Is he still with us? Well, as of the recording of this video, the information on Gene is still pretty limited, but I was able to find some information that may indicate that he still lives in Japan and owns a media company out there. Assuming, of course, that this is the same Gene Pelc. I was also able to find a video titled Gene Pelc that has a gentleman commentating over a Japanese shoot wrestling event back in 1993. But with only having these 2 black and white photos, the only confirmed photos of Gene that I could find online as the basis for a comparison, and the fact that these photos were taken from a side profile with 10 or more years having elapsed, there was really no way for me to discern if these men are one and the same. So that's pretty much that. I guess I'll leave it to you, the viewers, to decide whether or not Gene Pelc is or isn't an unsung hero of tokusatsu. Given the information, although very limited, I tend to lean towards the opinion that he is. And maybe someday we'll get some more information regarding all of this and have some of these questions that we have answered, maybe even by Gene himself. Gene, if you're out there and this video somehow reaches you, please feel free to contact me on any of my social media, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or even here on YouTube. I would love to hear your first-hand account and experiences working both in tokusatsu and animation in a well-established company in Japan, as well as what it was like during that time frame, how things were different and how they've changed. And maybe you could speak to and speculate on if Marvel had been the first to make a Super Sentai adaptation as opposed to Saban Entertainment. It would be really interesting to get a true insider's perspective on all of that. And just the same, to anybody else that's out there that has more information, or if there's something that I got wrong in this video and you just want to correct me, please feel free to contact me as well. Moving forward, what I'm hoping to do is, in between certain parts of its Henshin time, is spotlight people that you may or may have not heard of, that had some degree of involvement but didn't necessarily get all the proper credit that I believe that they are due. Gene wasn't the only one one, not by a long shot, and there are others that I would like to talk about in future installments of this, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section below if this is something that you would like to see as a reoccurring series in between certain parts of its Henshin time. And if you have your own recommendations, those are welcome as well. Thanks again so much for watching, and until next time, the hunt continues. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, share, and comment below.